we're a little bit different kind of airport, and say the airport mantra with me. If you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. We're a very big cargo airport, but the state of Alaska has 710,000 people in the entire state. We have just about 1 square mile per person, so we don't have a lot of people. We have about 300,000 in the Anchorage area, and yet all this cargo goes through, and that's the key word, through. Doesn't stop there, doesn't get off the airplane and get used by the people of Alaska, doesn't get generated by the people of Alaska. For the most part, it passes through. We are the global gas station. Like many airports, we had humble beginnings. This is the site of the Anchorage International Airport back in the late 1930s. Those are Lakes Hood and Spenard. The canal connecting them was constructed prior to the existence of the Environmental Protection Agency. We'd probably never be able to do that now. This is the airport in 1950. Still fairly small, still way out there away from town, where you'd like your airport to be. Unfortunately, we're not there anymore. We are now, as you can tell on the right-hand side and the bottom side, we are right next to the city of Anchorage. So as I read Dr. Casarda's book, and he talked about the city moves out to where the airport is, I thought, well, I've got pictures that prove that, because that's exactly what happened in Anchorage. The airport got bigger, we were growing toward our boundaries, and the city grew toward us. And unfortunately, I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a non-success story. You know, some of the folks here have got great success stories. The airport is owned and operated by the state of Alaska. We are surrounded on 2 sides by water and on 2 sides by the city of Anchorage. That's the state of Alaska and the city of Anchorage. Believe it or not, they don't talk a lot. And so the city went about growing and developing right out to the edge of the airport boundary, and the airport for many years went about developing toward its boundary, and the communication, cooperation, collaboration, any of those good C words between the two just didn't happen. And that's causing us issues that we'll talk about. This shows why we are important in the global cargo trade. We're within 9.5 hours of 90% of the industrialized world. But while we're huge in cargo, we don't need a lot of things that most cargo airports need. We don't need a lot of warehouses. We don't need a lot of truck access. We need a lot of parking spaces and a lot of fuel. A typical 747 will land and take on up to 40,000 gallons, and we see about 500 of those a week. That's why, as Chris pointed out, we're number 2 in North America and number 5 in the world for cargo. We're a huge economic engine. We're not oil, which is number 1 and the sacred cow in all of Alaska, but we do have a lot of jobs at the airport. Remember, I said there aren't that many people that live in Alaska or Anchorage. About 1 in 10 jobs in the city of Anchorage owes itself to the existence of the airport. That's a good thing, because everybody in town knows someone that works at the airport. Most of the people in town depend on some part of their income from people that work at the airport. And that tends to get you pretty good acceptance in the community for the most part. We contribute just about $1 billion in direct and indirect payroll. Our path to success is going to be, and this is some of the things we didn't do in the past, we're going to communicate, and you've heard that before in this conference. You have to involve all the stakeholders. We're going to cooperate. We are a small state-owned airport. And one of the things you've learned at the conference is how is an airport supposed to do business? An airport's supposed to do business like businesses do business. I'm part of the state government, and if I were to tell you I'm going to do business like a business does business, you should laugh. Government entities don't really do business like businesses or like anybody else. That's not our strong suit. So we're going to have to cooperate and depend on other people to do that. And we're also going to keep an eye on our competition. Communication, we're taking a different approach. This is not only about communicating with people outside the airport, but it's about communicating with people inside the airport. Your staff and employees need to know what your goals and your mission are. They need to know those things. Your stakeholders, the public, the business community, all those people need to know what you're doing at the airport. And more importantly, just even more importantly than talking to those people, what do you think you need to do? You need to listen to those people. Because you know what? Some of those employees have real good ideas. They know people, and they are people that are real smart. Those business people know what kind of businesses will and won't work at the airport. That's their area of expertise. So we're going to spend a lot of time communicating, and most of that is going to be spent listening. Cooperating. I said in the past the municipality did what they wanted to do and the airport did what it wanted to do, and there was a yellow line that divided us, and we never worried about it until we got real close to the line. Well, those days are gone. So we're very involved now in working with the community and the municipality, and I use those as two different entities for a reason. We've participated in a West Anchorage District Plan, which was a municipal effort to determine the future of the part of Anchorage that surrounds us, and we're about 30% of the land mass of West Anchorage. So we're kind of the 800-pound gorilla, and this was basically a municipal land use plan all about the airport. So we got to spend a lot of time with the NIMBYs. And for those of you that don't remember what a NIMBY is, that's the not in my backyard people, and we're in their backyard and their front yard and over their heads a lot of times. We're getting ready to start a master plan, and we're going to be very, very involved listening to the public. And we also use the expertise, as I said, of a lot of different agencies, both state and private. We have a number of state agencies that are supposed to be focused on economic development. That's exactly what we expect them to do, and we expect them to help us develop the airport. We've done a number of tours for site selectors, and those tours were set up not by us at the airport, but by the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. That's what they do for the city of Anchorage, and so we're cooperating with them and capitalizing on their expertise. Competition. We are not alone. You are not alone. Every business you want, every site selector that visits you, every development you try to do, you're not the only one that's trying to do it. Some of the rest of us are trying to do it too. And so it's important to keep an eye on your competition. You'd prefer doing that by looking over your shoulder to make sure you stay ahead of them. But every once in a while, you're going to have to look forward and see somebody that's beat you to something, and then try to see how to do it better than they are. Not everything works. Not every airport can be everything. There are a lot of niches that people have brought to us and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if? And quite frankly, we go, no, not really. You know, that's probably something for somebody somewhere else to do. And I'll talk about a couple of those. And those of you that think you've heard the strangest business proposition, hang on. A few years ago, as part of a BRAC action, we didn't gain anything. We lost the coolest Air National Guard base. And I'd like to talk about some of the challenges this has caused us. It was 130 acres, not very big, but our airport, unlike some of the gigundo airports that are represented here today, we have about 4,600 acres. We're just a nice little airport. But 130 acres that was developed and was an absolutely wonderfully functioning Air National Guard C-130 base. They moved that operation to Elmendorf Air Force Base over on the other side of Anchorage. And the land was ours. They leased it and operated the base, and so they packed up and left. And they left us 3 hangars. They left us a C-130 ramp and a whole bunch of other buildings, all of which worked very well for an Air National Guard C-130 base. Vast majority of those buildings had no purpose on a commercial airport. They were in the wrong place, they were the wrong size, they just weren't the kind of building we needed. So the first thing we did was we talked DOD, Department of Defense, into demolishing most of those buildings. We kept a warehouse, we kept a couple, 2 or 3 office buildings, a dining hall, and the 3 hangars. And we said we need to get everything else out of the way, because when we develop it, we need all that stuff gone. We don't want to have to bear the cost of getting rid of it later. And then we started trying to figure out what to do with Coulis. We had an extensive public process. The public very much liked the Air National Guard base. It was low traffic, low impact, not a lot of flights every day, and they liked that. They initially said, well, you need to make this all non-aeronautical, and use these office buildings and do a lot of office building rental. And we explained that office buildings generate actually a lot more traffic than most airport buildings, and that would increase the traffic on their little neighborhood road that they're so fond of, and they decided they didn't really like the office building idea anymore. We should do something else. And some of the ideas that came to us were truly amusing. The first group of people that showed up, of course, were all the federal agencies and many of the state agencies in town, because they said, aha, the airport has got cheap office space. And then we explained that it was non-aeronautical and therefore would be fair market rent, much like they were paying in their current location. And when they finally came to realize that it wasn't going to be a good economic deal, they all disappeared and went back to their existing office spaces. Then we had the other groups that showed up that were much more interesting. The community said, well, it was an Air National Guard base. They must have had a gymnasium. Therefore, you will need to give that building to the community for a rec center. We said, well, fortunately for us, they didn't have a gymnasium, so we don't have to give you anything as a rec center, and so we're going to keep it as airport property. Thank you very much. We had a church that wanted to locate in one of the buildings to have their congregation there, and we explained that that's probably not a good compatible land use with an airport, but with all the airplane noise, and the airplanes don't take Sunday off, so that really wasn't going to be terribly functional. The most interesting applicant that we had that wanted some property, because once again, they looked at the hangars, and hangars are fascinating structures. They're really big, they're really open, there's a lot of space, and you can do anything in them. You could, if you wanted, inside an aircraft hangar, you could build a roller rink. And we could have been the home of the Anchorage Rage City Roller Girl roller derby team, because they thought one of those hangars would be just a perfect place for the roller derby team. And we said, well, that's probably not what we're going to use a hangar for, but thank you for your interest, and we moved on to the next applicant. One group that has been very persistent in an absolutely non-aeronautical way, and how many of you, let's see, I'll probably get more hands this way. How many of you have seen one of the many Alaskan reality TV shows? Has anybody not seen any of them? I mean, everybody's seen Ice Road Truckers, The Deadliest Catch, Alaska State Troopers, Coast Guard Kodiak, Flying Alaska. That's a few of them. Well, that's the TV industry. Well, related to that is the film industry, who has suddenly decided, thanks to some tax benefits from the state of Alaska, that Alaska is a great place to make movies. And what do you need to make movies? You need sound stages. What do sound stages look like? Big open buildings with lots of clear span where you can build sets. So the movie industry has decided that the airport is absolutely the place where they want to come make movies. Now the tough part is, well, there are a few problems with that. One is each production company only wants to rent the space they need for about 6 months, and then they want to move on. And I'm really not interested in changing tenants every 6 months. We've had a couple third-party developers that want to come in and rent it long-term and then sublease the hangars to the various production companies. The problem with that is we're having a hard time concluding that the film industry use of an aircraft hangar is the highest and best use of that facility on the airport. And yes, one of them did ask the one question that I warned them ahead of time would absolutely make my head explode. And that question was, that airplane noise, can you do something about that? Because we're trying to make a movie here. They weren't happy when they left because I explained to them that simply wasn't going to happen. We do have a couple challenges, though, as we're trying to find the balance between aeronautical and non-aeronautical use of this property and other property on the airport. It is a balance, and as the aeronautical needs ebb and flow, you'd like to be able to take up the slack or to move off the airport the non-aeronautical uses. And unfortunately, with the governance that we have with the FAA and the grant assurances, at least in the Alaska region, it's difficult to have that flexibility. The only thing more challenging than being a state government-owned and operated business is being a business operating under the rules and regulations of the Federal Aviation Administration. They have no problem letting us let this property be non-aeronautical on a short-term basis for up to 5 years or so at a time. It's tough to get tenants to invest a lot of money for a 5-year lease. If we want it longer term, well, that's not a problem. We just need to reclassify the property as non-aeronautical and run the risk of never being able to convert it back. I don't have 90,000 acres, I have 4,600 acres. I'm not really interested in giving any of it up on a potential permanent basis. I believe it's important for us to preserve the ability for aeronautical development. So those requirements of the FAA to either go long-term, you may never be able to put airplanes there ever, or short-term lease, which limits the investment, are proving to be very challenging to us. We're going to continue working that problem. I'm confident we can come up with answers, but it's going to take creative thinking on our part, creative thinking on some third-party developers' parts, and some leveraging of the FAA to come to understand that the control they exert over airports in the United States needs to be done in a manner that allows those airports to develop as they need and to generate non-aeronautical revenue in the meantime. And quite frankly, in our case, that's a paradigm they haven't come to see yet, but we're going to try to convince them and move on. So unlike some of the airports you have heard from and will hear from, we are not an aerotropolis. We are an airport city, according to Dr. Casarda, and we're a very crucial link in the global supply chain. But we have our challenges, and we're going to attack those challenges and try to solve them in innovative ways, because the old ways of doing business don't work anymore, and we're going to have to adapt or become one of the slow that gets eaten by the fast. Thank you.